The dusty wind of Willow Creek whispered through the valley that morning, carrying with it the smell of pine, river water, and a quiet tension that stretched from the chapel doors all the way down the long red dirt path leading into town, and at the far end of that path stood a girl named Alara, barefoot, trembling, her dress once white but now smudged by miles of walking, her hair tangled with dried leaves from the forest she had crossed alone, and her eyes fixed on the small wooden church where the townsfolk were gathering for her wedding, a wedding they did not believe she deserved. For weeks, whispers had spread like wildfire, that the bride had been abandoned by her own kin, that she had no money for shoes, that she had been left behind by the very man she was meant to marry, and yet here she was, arriving with nothing but a simple dress clinging to her thin frame. The townspeople snickered behind their hands, old women shaking their heads, younger ones smirking as though her bare feet were proof of some hidden shame, and the men laughed openly, nudging each other, calling it a spectacle, a joke, a wedding doomed before it even began. But what none of them knew, what not a single soul in Willow Creek understood, was why Alara had come alone, or why she had given up every last thing she owned to make it there. She had met Rourke, the mountain man of Silver Ridge, during the hardest winter of her life, a winter that took her father, burned down her home, and nearly stole her life along with the rest. Rourke had found her half frozen beneath a fallen spruce, carried her up the ridge to his cabin, and nursed her back to strength with quiet patience and steady hands. He was a man of few words, built like the mountains themselves, strong, silent, immovable, yet he had a gentleness that existed in small hidden places. The way he stirred soup slowly so it wouldn't burn, the way he draped an extra blanket around her shoulders when he thought she was asleep, the way he looked at her as if she was a sunrise he wasn't sure he deserved to witness. When spring came, and she was strong enough to stand again, he asked her to be his wife, not with a ring or a fancy proposal, but with a promise that echoed in the stillness of the mountains. If you walk with me, I'll spend my life making sure you never walk alone again. But the road to town was long, and money was scarce, and when thieves stole her pack during the night, her shoes, her small bag, everything she owned, she refused to turn back. She walked the remaining 9 miles barefoot, through brush, over rocks, through streams so cold they numbed her toes, her feet bleeding by sunrise, but she walked because love was worth arriving for. Now, seeing her enter Willow Creek in such a state, the laughter grew louder, uglier, cutting deeper than any stone she had stepped on. The preacher raised an eyebrow, the bridesmaids exchanged looks of smug pity, and the man she was supposed to marry, Thomas, a blacksmith she had agreed to wed years ago under her father's urging before she ever met Rourke, stood frozen, embarrassed, saying nothing in her defense. But before anyone could speak another cruel word, the ground trembled under massive footsteps, and a shadow fell across the entire doorway of the church. Every head turned, gasps rippled through the crowd like a sudden gust of wind, and there he was, Rourke, the mountain man, towering, broad-shouldered, his beard thick and wind-tangled, his hair brushing his shoulders, his buckskin clothes dusty from the ride, his chest rising like a storm about to break, and in his hands, he carried her stolen shoes, or what was left of them. He had tracked the thieves down, reclaimed what he could, and followed her trail all the way to Willow Creek. The laughter died so fast you could hear the quiet crackle of pine needles under his boots. Without saying a word, he walked straight to Alara, his presence turning the air heavy, the townsfolk shrinking back as though they were suddenly aware of their own smallness. He knelt before her, not caring that the dust swirled around him like smoke, and looked at her feet, scratched and bruised from the miles she had endured. Gently, he slid one arm behind her knees and the other behind her back and lifted her with a tenderness that made half the crowd swallow hard. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Even the preacher forgot how to breathe. Rourke didn't look at the crowd, he didn't give them the dignity of acknowledgement. Instead, he held her close and murmured, just loud enough for her trembling heart to hear, "You should never have walked alone. Not today." Then, as if carrying something precious and sacred, he strode forward, past the frozen guests, past the gas-blocked bridesmaids, past the man who had promised to marry her but never bothered to meet her halfway, and carried her through the church doors. What happened next would be talked about for generations. Rourke turned to Thomas, whose face had gone the color of ash, and said, "She walked 9 miles for a man who couldn't walk 9 steps for her. If she chooses you, I'll leave. But if she chooses me, I'll love her with everything I am." Everything went silent. The air swelled with truth too heavy to ignore. Alara's voice, soft but unwavering, filled the chapel. I choose the man who carried me when the world laughed. And with that, the room erupted. Not with laughter this time, but with stunned awe, shame, and a few quiet cheers from those who recognized courage when they saw it. The preacher cleared his throat, unsure how to proceed, but Rourke simply smiled and set Alara gently on her feet. He didn't care about their stares. He cared about her, and when they exchanged vows, simple, raw, spoken from the heart, the mountains themselves seemed to hum in approval. Outside, the laughter that had mocked her bare feet was replaced by whispers of respect. The barefoot bride had become the bravest soul in Willow Creek, and the mountain man who carried her inside had rewritten what it meant to be worthy of love. And so, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the evening glow painted the chapel gold, their story began. Not with shoes, not with wealth, not with approval, but with courage, loyalty, and a love strong enough to silence a town. If you felt the power of this story, if it touched your heart or painted a picture in your mind, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, because more stories of courage, love, and unforgettable Western legends are on the way, and you won't want to miss a single one.